Sunita, thanks a lot for joining today. So we can get started with this episode. And typically we start the episode by talking about Culture Monkey, what Culture Monkey does, and even that we felt it would be boring if we talked about what the product does and all that, right? So I always felt that this story behind Culture Monkey does a great job in telling people what Culture Monkey does, right? So I'll start with this story. So just 2 minutes, where I was an engineer for for more than a decade, right? So I started as an engineer, and I always struggled with this one problem where managers never really realized that employee happiness, employee productivity, and employee delivering their maximum always depended on this freedom that can be given to the engineers. For me, I mean, I was personally thinking that, and I worked globally in many cities, right, in the Europe or in the Singapore. So and I always felt this point of view, my point of view, where this freedom was denied for the employees, was all I had multiple sessions, feedback sessions with managers. Nothing moved, right? And I was sometimes scared of to be open, because it's not there's no anonymity, and also all my feedback felt like it went into a black hole, right? There was no closure, there was no actions that was taken on the feedback, and I kind of lost the hope on this process. And of course, 2017, we with all of this history contained in me, I came and started a software consultancy service with Joseph as a co-founder. And we were smart, we advanced technological stuff we were doing. And we noticed this one thing where we felt there is 0% attrition, both on customers, both from customers and from employees. We were able to make all stakeholders very happy, right? And we talked about what is this? What is going on here, right? So then we realized, okay, this is called culture, right? The way the way we treat people, the way we behave, and the way we do everyday tasks, right? That was being the differentiator for our company. And we said, okay, let's take this culture piece and scale this. And then we felt, okay, let's build a culture software. And now we have Culture Monkey. That's how it was born in 2018. And we have a lot of enterprise clients now, and we have now it's so fulfilling to see that more than 100,000 employees, unique employees, we are able to it's fulfilling to see that my problem is getting solved for these employees. And we have like more than 2.5 million individual data points, just in 2-3 years that we've launched. And with all of these data points, we realize that managers have a key role in this engagement. That's why we also have a separate module for managers. And they are the ones who's personalizing engagement for their team, right? So out of all of this, gave birth to this theme that what is the evolving role of managers in this employee engagement and culture, right? That's why we are here. So yeah, so without any further delay, we can get started. Over to you, Ketan.
Thank you, Senthil. Always very interesting to hear back this story, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I decided to be a part of this journey of helping them connect to people who can bring in insights, because listening is something core to engagement that we talk about, and that's something that we are also building up in Culture Monkey. And Sunita, thank you again for joining in. For our audience, a quick introduction of Sunita. She's the CHRO for Ather Energy. She's also an author and a speaker. She's worked with brands like Polaris, NIT, Talent Pro, AIG Systems, Mphasis, Matrimony, amongst some of the brands over her last 22 years of experience. While HR is something which is core to her, she is an HR professional. Organization culture, and I'll tell you how and why I was able to connect with her, is something that she's something very, very core to her. She believes in that. In fact, I interacted with Sunita in one of the forums, and incidentally, the topic was about culture. And Sunita, I still remember the Kanjivaram Sari example that you gave about culture. It just simplified the definition of culture so well for me. if you can, definitely share that with the audience, because the people who usually consume the content are people who are in the HR fraternity, leaders, business managers, who are trying to understand what is happening across the world. So Sunita and culture, if I understand, go hand in hand, very, very together. Her keen interest is in the space of unconscious processes in individual groups and system, which I'm sure she would get some insights about them today. She is a strong and a very, very a firm believer in the power of storytelling. So she is a oral traditional storyteller. We will see a lot of that. I saw quite a lot of that in the session that I had where Sunita was speaking. Her book is named as Dotting the Blemish and Other Stories. It's a collection of short stories about women that reflect and comment on the inherent prejudices that we have in a society. And Sunita, welcome again to Culture Club's masterclass powered by Culture Monkey. And thank you so much for your time. This session, as Senthil said, is where we are going to talk about sustaining and growing employee engagement, the evolving role of managers. Now, before we get into some of the interesting questions that we have for you, could you tell us more about you, about your organization, and a little bit about, I'm using the word little bit, but I want it to be more about your experiences and your point of view about culture. So yeah, well, Sunita, over to you.
Brilliant.
Hey, Senthil and Ketan, thank you very much. Thank you for the invite. And Ketan, I think I'd love to be the same panel where you're there again, having a conversation.
Thank you.
Appreciate the interest in Aether, because I think it all starts from Aether to me largely, because you have seen what Aether is doing, and that's why the invite is coming. I would like to believe I'm so charismatic that you're calling me, but that's not true.
It is true, trust me.
A lot of it is the work that's happening at Aether, and Aether is it's an amalgamation of an organization which has hardware engineering, software engineering, and the whole the way that we experiment in our business model and the way we experiment in our operations. It is in the EV mobility space, we are the front runners and probably pioneers, and we believe that we have shaken the status quo in the two-wheeler segment, with the product we have come up with. Whether it is the 450X or 450 or charging infrastructure or the battery, take any of this. This is all being designed and produced at our space and our factory, and we are very proud of what we have put out there. There was an enormous amount of learning for us, and the last 7 years journey has been how do you build a hardware engineering company in India and continue to disproportionately invest in culture, and what does investing in culture mean? Does it mean about putting out posters? Does it mean about we talking about it, wearing the t-shirt with the logo on that? Or does it mean about continuously engaging with it in various forums? What does it mean, And it also, as an organization being startup to a young organization, we also saw the journey on a lot of highs and lows. There is a funding, there is also what's happening during pandemic. How do you consistently be in the space of culture building and keep that very important when you're going through these highs and lows? I think that's what our commitment to culture is. It's not that we are committed to culture when things are nice and happy. It's when things are not very nice and we have to go back to the larger audience and talk about it. That's where I think the commitment of culture comes, and it starts from, in our case, it starts with the founders, and then the first 50 who were made Aether possible. It was very important that they cohesively built it. And then comes the whole thing around what happened with the rest of the organization as we started growing, building the engineering teams, building the operations team, building the business teams. And as we are entering into new cities, how do you make this thing not fragmented, but still be the essence of it carried into all these places? That's the challenge we are still working with.
So, and a very important question, Sunita, how do you see culture? And I would definitely call out the story that you shared with me, or the about the Kanjivaram sari. I think it was wonderful. If you're okay, could you share it with for our audience before we get into the question?
Okay, the Kanjipuram sari has two things. One, when I joined Aether, it was, I think, no one expected someone will come into the conference room and start talking about Kanjipuram sari and talking about culture in the same sentence. It's like, and you do have to remember that we were we're very young male organization at that point of time. So diversity was of thought, and diversity of any other shades were slightly difficult. So from there we have become aware. The moment we become aware, then you start acting on it. You start building on it. So the first point always is being aware, and accepting it. Being aware and accepting and moving on. So for me, Kanjipuram sari is why I say culture is weaving culture, not crafting culture or curating culture. Is weaving is, if you have ever seen a handloom weaver weaving a sari, it is very therapeutic. Actually, it's so beautiful. He has he or she has this picture in mind, okay, of the sari, okay, and they, with so much of love and patience, they actually pick up the right thread, and then work on dyeing, and then start weaving it thread by thread, and to me, each of these thread, denote the decisions we make or decisions we don't make. Okay, the conflicts we resolve, and the conflicts the way we over-index on something. All these are the threads that weave into our culture. There is nothing out there. The border. What is that enriching? That capability building is your border. The pallu is the amount of commitment the leadership has on it. So each of this is what goes into this thread by thread. How do you weave? How do you make those decisions? How do you resolve conflicts? How do you solve problems? How do you recognize? How do you reward? All of this is what your culture is about. It is not about anything which tangible that you can just pick it and say this directly correlates to that. It is like the whole process. You have to have the picture in mind, saying what is the end objective you want to reach, and then you have to have the patience of a weaver to weave it. And to us at Aether, I always say it's the beautiful Kanjipuram sari. It's that rich tone and the color and the boutiques and the mountains and the whole hamsas. How do you actually put the design out there and then start weaving it, and how much of us are committed to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm able to completely relate to this because, I must have been to Kanjipuram myself like 15, 20 times. Like in Chennai, in all weddings, we have to go there, right? So, and I've seen some of these things that you're saying, and I'm also able to, and now also having built Culture SAS and being here, all your words made extraordinary sense to me. Thanks a lot, Sunita. Yeah.
There is no quick fix in that. There is no instant coffee there. It has to be the filter coffee, and you got to realize that why I say handloom is it's not a power loom, which means that you need to work on it, and with so much of patience, and your commitment. See, anything that you make a wrong thing will reflect on your sari itself. The weave, if you've been with a weaver, sat with a handloom when they're doing the weaving and sat next to them, the passion they are and the commitment they have. And if a thread count which is not good or not finely done, it shows on your fabric, And finally, an end product sari will have the knot there, So how do you actually commit to culture? It is a leadership commitment largely. Okay. And then the weave starts. The weaving starts from there. The loom you're picking up, the thread you're picking up. Okay.
Powerful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I every time I hear that, something new that I pick up. Thank you for that, Sunita. I will straight jump to the questions now. On this topic around sustaining and growing employee engagement, evolving role of manager, the first question that we want a perspective from you is that, do you think that organizations without manager could be a reality of the future? Why or why not? So whatever is your point of view, if you could help us, if you could throw your perspective throw some light and share your perspective on that.
See, I will give an example of Aether. Aether, for example, we have what we call horizontals and verticals, the verticals or the functions, like for example, hardware engineering, battery engineering, manufacturing engineering, the whole verticals, even POPs, people operations, and there is a finance. We are all we are the functions or the verticals, and there's this whole horizontals which are the execution teams. The cross-functional teams come together and solve. Whether they're working on a component or whether they're working on a subsystem itself, or they're working on solving a problem like transition from Whitefield factory to a Hosur factory. Any of these things, or they're working on sales, they're working on opening up new experience centers. It is not one function that sits in a silo and works. They cross-functional teams come together and call swim lanes, and they work on a swim lane. Now the question is, what is the role of the manager here? Because the manager is supposed to actually depute their team member to the swim lanes. They have to depute the rest of the person who can solve that problem. Okay, and make in the swim lane, they are authorized to make a decision. They are not supposed to say that I will go check with my manager and come back. Oh, that's not accepted. Your person who's in the swim lane, if the person needs time to do research and figure out something, or is still not confident on the decision, that person can say, I am going to spend some more time figuring this out and come back, and can come back to the function and ask for the expertise, ask for resources, whatever it is, then go back. But the decision maker is the person who's appointed there. And there is no manager in the swim lane. Swim lane is cross-functional members coming together, working for a problem statement. That problem statement can be services, can be products, can be a major change, or managing crisis. Any of this they can do, and they make decisions, move forward. So this, I'm giving you an example because your question is related to this only. Okay, what is the evolving role of a manager? So we went through this whole, when we shifted to this model of working, suddenly managers, functional leaders and managers became lost thinking, what is my role now? Okay, what am I doing, by the way? Because they were having this, they were very much, see, our functional leaders are experts, they know the subject, they know they are supposed to be very good in what they do. And that's why they are in that place, they have the experience, they have the capability, competence and all that. And suddenly they are standing there and realizing they're not making any decisions regarding any of these things, but their team member is going in. So how do you now, then you have to look for a new role for yourself. And what is that new role? Frankly speaking, what is that new role? The new role is about, it is about building that function and depth in competence and capability and capacity. Okay. How do you build capacity? Either the capacity can be, you look at in the next 3 years, this is where my organization is going, and this is where the world is going, and I will need this technology and this experience and this thing, and look at inwardly at your own team and say that, do I have to bring some capacity inside? Because I will fall if the swim lanes start questioning and asking me for some expertise in certain areas I do not have. I can visualize this is going this path. It is not only about the next 12 months, about the next 3 years, what is the story about your business, your organization, vis-a-vis the environment outside. You have to be very conscious on what's changing in the out, which means that you should be reading, constantly looking at the threads, which is a very difficult part, While we all talk about learning and reading is important, the first thing you start doing, picking it, you want to sleep, because you're tired, because you're so tired of execution. Now you're moving you have to move your gears and come into something which is long-term issue. So then you look at your team and say capacity. Do I have the capacity for what will come and as an ask from the cross-functional teams? Do I have the capacity in terms of people there? And do I have to hire or cross-train or quickly mentor someone into that space? The second part of it is about the managers looking at capability building. Okay, till now, capability building is like HR is asking, it is such a painful thing. I have to let go of my team members because there is some 48 hours of training that is required as mandated. See, we in IT services industry, we have tried everything. I think it has been tried. You need compulsory so many hours to become manager, to a lot of other things, which is big, it is fine. Okay, but how long are we going to police people? Yeah. Capability building is very inherently your need, and the need of the organization somewhere mapping it out. I can't say, no, I want to learn Bharatanatyam and the organization has to support that. That's not capability building. What does the organization require, and how do I build competence in that space, and how do I build my capability? So how do we actually build, how the managers, we have to move that this being a push to a pull by managers saying that I want to build my department, my function in these areas, and how do I make it happen? And that those people work with L&D or talent management departments to work on the capability building roadmap. That roadmap can be about training, about special projects, on the job trainings and all that. So the role of the manager, when you shift it like this, it's a huge shift. While I'm saying this like this, we have done this at Ather, and I know it is still work in progress for us, and enormous amount of communication. Otherwise, you're going to bring in so much of fear in the managers because they don't know what their job now going to be. Okay. When I'm saying managers, I'm not saying some of the managers themselves might be in the cross-functional teams, but I'm talking about largely the functional leaders who are having a large teams. What is their role? Okay. Is their role to deliver to these things or is their role to build a very competent organization? Okay. So do you need managers? We need managers. I will explain why we need managers. But do you need managers for execution is my question. Can you hire team members who are self-motivated and who can deliver, and have managers do something else? And that something else is what we have to talk about. We need managers, but not for this. So I go behind, say, hey, have you done this? Have you done this? Oh man, it's tiring, Just follow-ups and all is a very tiring process.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. So what I hear from Sunita is that do we need managers? Yes. But in the form that it existed and the expectation that existed historically, which is administration and execution, she's saying no, and we'll talk about that as we go ahead. Another question linked to this, Sunita, from the experience that you bring to the table. Now, why has the world been divided on the impact a manager has on something like a matter of employee engagement? Now, having worked with firms like Aditya Birla Group or IDFC, where Great Places to Work or a Gallup study was crucial, which every time said that manager is the most important piece in the entire chain. But I also interact with a lot of young organizations where it is assumed to be not managers' responsibility. What's been your experience of this divide of some believing that engagement is something that managers needs to own, and somewhere saying that no, manager is not supposed to own engagement? What has been your experience and point of view?
I think first we have to go back to ask this question: what is engagement in the mind of these people? What is engagement? Okay, we all go in the evening, have a party. Is that an engagement? Or I listen to you saying that how marketing messed up or HR department messed up. Is that engagement? Or what is the engagement in the minds of people? That I want. Is it effectiveness or my engagement? So now the next question I want to understand is why is it divided? Or that is the question. Why are we divided? Because it's a huge change, Ketan. What you're asking is a change. Change. We are used to certain model, and that model we are asking to shift, and it creates an enormous amount of anxiety in the system. The anxiety of not knowing what's going to come and fall on my face, and the other thing is, am I relevant or not? That is the biggest anxiety everyone holds. Now that if you're changing the style, am I relevant in the scheme of things? The third is that I have to change and look for new way of serving the system, and I am not even sure whether I am now in the mental model of wanting to learn something, See, because you're used to a pattern, and from that pattern I have to shift, and that shift is very, very, for humans, we only talk about it, saying that change is important and learning is important and all that stuff. All of us know how difficult it is.
Yes.
And it requires enormous commitment. And the word I use is resilience and grit. You should have phenomenal grit to pull it off. Commitment to resilience is because you have to have commitment to stay the course. Okay, there are so many times you feel like going back. So managers it is not true that managers are not so much required for their team members' effectiveness. They are very required because human beings inherently, we need to go back and have a conversation about whether I'm doing okay, I'm doing well, I'm struggling, okay, I need help, and talk about their responsibilities changing or not changing. They're feeling bored about it, getting stuck about it, and also are they making progress in these cross-functional teams where if that is the model you people are working on, the cross-functional teams, or when they're delivering something for the goal. Are they, is there any complexity changes that are happening? Are they making progress? If they're not making progress, sometimes when you're sitting, you talked about listening, we are just sitting there and listening and just keep asking questions. And many times the team member figures it out. The teams are very smart. All they want is someone to be there to ask the question, to invest in them. And that's the engagement I talk. How do you invest? How do you show that you care, and you really are invested in that individual? That is the engagement we should talk about. That investment, if you're willing to do, then it results in two things. One is affiliation, the affiliation to the department or to the organization. Okay. It also builds in excellence, because excellence is what finally your high level of effectiveness, it builds in. And the third is it also builds in mastery, because there is a master or a person who's slightly more aware of things, or is willing to look at it from 60,000 feet and sit with you and work with you. Then you build the capability with that person. Then you build on what I call the mastery. How do you build the capability? That is what the manager is required. And we need, in fact, at Ather, one of our behavior as part of our values is listen. Listening, we actually say, we call it out saying listening is important, So because we know most of them don't listen, we just wait for the other to stop talking and then we start. So we say listen, really listen, that's the same behavior we say we want. So managers have a huge role to play in this space, this new curated responsibilities, not the old one.
I'm sure you would be interacting with a lot of these managers also. We've been talking about the changes that employees are expecting, the transitions that everyone is going through, and I'm so glad that you're talking about from a manager perspective, trying to understand how do they see engagement. What does it mean to them? What are the kind of difficulties they are possibly going through? What are the answers they are looking for themselves? Now, with one dimension of this entire digitization of the world going remote as much as it could, what are the top 3 changes, or what are the top 3 expectation shifts you have seen organizations and employee had with their manager earlier and their manager now? I hear you did speak about they being looking at capability, they being talking about something which is long-term, something future. If I may just try to bring it together and say, what are the 3 things that you believe that the employees and the organizations are now expecting from managers, or would be expecting from managers in the new normal, or a kind of a different world that we are
in? Traditionally managers were more like authority figures.
Mm-hmm.
And at family, we have the mother, father, and probably some uncles if they're all joint family. And we superimpose the whole thing when they come into the organization and say this whole, and that's okay. They don't like or don't like, depending upon what is your mental model about an authority figure. How has your experience been with an authority figure? You either like your manager or don't like your manager, so they have been authority figures who took decisions, and also they were also the people who, some managers were prescriptive by saying you have to do it the how, and not only talking about the why and the what, they also did the how part of it, how you have to do it, bordering on OCD, they would I myself am there, but generally I'm saying it's a very easily the how part of it is a very prescriptive models, they used to. And the other one, they also held responsibility for it, for delivering, saying that, okay, I deliver, they give assurances to the organization, don't worry, I will deliver it. Okay. Come what may, I will deliver. So their neck was on the block, so that's how the whole model worked. Now shifted to current generation, really talking Ketan and Senthil, the current generation, do you think this model works? You see, every year you're bringing in new set of people, and the wave after wave, you're bringing all the new generation who have grown in a different environment. See, it is in context of what sort of an environment they have grown and what sort of an access do they had for information and how they process this information and what type of people you're bringing inside. Now, going back and saying what was applicable in 80s or 70s or 90s in 2021, 22 is funny. It is just says that as HR, we are generally a little bit lazy, and as leadership, we are lazy. We're just using the same models, again and again, not willing to look at the relevance of some of this, and what is changing. So the question now then it becomes, then I'm setting the context, because otherwise just giving you some 3 bullet points makes no sense. So what are employees looking forward from their managers? They're looking forward from their managers because whatever changes outside, you still need mentors. You need a mentors who is disproportionately invested in your career, okay, and not in my career. As a manager, I'm invested in your career. So that is important. How do you display that you're disproportionately interested in career? Not every year I give you a promotion and give you some money and all that stuff. Building your competence. Okay, that is the only gift we can give as manager. Remember, people can hate me for not being a great manager, can hate me for whatever it is, but they can never take away if I have spent enormous time in building capacity and capability in that person. Because that is the gift the managers have. So how do you show that you're disproportionately invested in the career of the other person? And build organizations and second is, there are many things in showing that investment. I'm invested in you can be shown in many ways. The other part is what organizations look is building a very competent function. Okay, that's what organizations are looking for. Then third one is, which as a human element, what we are looking for is between, because the all three has to join in, isn't it? The role of the organization, there is this, your team member and yourself, there is yourself. So how do you, one is the team member is investment in themselves in terms of disproportionately in interest in them and in their career. And the organization is looking at building a competent function. And what are you looking for as a manager? Okay, not you delivering and becoming an execution king or queen, but delivering through a team that is extremely rock star team, the team that is a team in terms of capacity to be effective in delivering what needs to be delivered. Your joy should come from your team, not from you doing something and having a mileage of that. That is a very different shift for a manager. How do you feel satisfied when through a team delivering it, not you being the rock star standing there and telling how to do it? That is, we have to rewire ourselves. And all these three have a lot of things about empowerment. It is about capability building. It is about mentoring. It is a lot of other things, listening, whole 9 yards we can go. But actually it is at the intersectionality of these three things is the organization sitting, which is built a new model of managing their team members.
I just take it ahead. So the question that I have is, and this is for all the managers who watch our episodes, looking at what you foresee for next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what are the things that you would want them to start investing in, start focusing in? Because while the organizations are changing, and being a manager, I can tell you they are at the cusp of expectations from the top and expectation from the team. So they are the one who get pulled a lot. Now, what you've spoken about how important it is for them to build on the competency and the capability of the team. If you're saying that's one thing that they should focus on.
See, if you have to ask me, drill it down into various things that they should. So first thing I think I'll always ask, what is your hiring? How do you hire talent in your team? Okay, is it that you hire people better than you? It starts from there, Do you hire people who are smarter than you, better than you? See, I always think that some places, whether it is myself or at Ather in large, one thing we always say is, please hire people who are smarter than us, because with us, if we are smart at this level and you're able to solve problems at this level, then you're saturated that piece, You have to be challenged and you have to flip a bit higher and constantly hire smarter than people. And we don't want functional leaders to solve every engineering problem that's come. The engineer who has just came out of the college, a graduate who's just come inside, can solve that problem because they're smart enough to do it. Now you should take great pride in just looking at the person and saying, this is my hire, I hired this person, I identified this person. The joy of saying that, this is the person I had. So it starts at that place, Are you hiring the A talent? And have you invested in putting together your whole interviewing process, on acquisition of talent? Do you think it is a responsibility of HR or it's responsibility of someone to give you some profiles and you see through that? See, you're so busy executing, you're not investing on the first step. Fundamentally, you need to actually build this whole team, and shift in. If you have, you want self-directed groups, then you need to have people who are like, if you go on hiring people who needs a lot of validation, it's not going to work in a self-directed groups, they will be lost because no one is going to be sitting there, validating them, patting them on their back and all that stuff, High passion, they're all raring to go and they're going to go and solve. And suddenly this person is going to feel lost. There's nothing wrong, but that's not the type of person in that organization. So what is the type of organization, what type of talent you want to build? Your exercise starts there. It cannot magically one fine morning you wake up and you have the coffee being served for you. You've got to work with it. Okay, you have to go look for the bean and get it roasted and get the powder, and do the filter coffee, the 9 months to make it happen. So that's about talent hiring, Then it's about, again, the same thing. There is no magic here, Ketan, but really all those things that we have put it in back burner, please bring it forward into your mind space and in front of you. Capability building. Are you doing it because it is required for you to do it, or are you doing it because you know that what is the org design that you have? What are the roles that are there in this org? And to deliver those, why are these roles required? And these roles require what competency at what proficiency level? And what is the assessment that you have done in your organization to say that whether your organization has the competence? Or do you want to start putting your capability building on that? Okay. And also, this whole model we have, so different types of leadership models we have. We have some leaders who will create this enemy and let's go fight the war. That's the sort of a story. So there is this whole subsystem fighting with the next subsystem who's in the next door. The war is somewhere outside. First you have to create a product or a service and go to the market and win it there. These small bickerings are not going to take you anywhere. Now, in the absence of this, what is the leadership that you have to find in yourself? And the the people will like you and be glued to you only if you are, I talked about your disproportionate investment in their career, Then sitting with your we call talent partners, with the HRBP, and saying that what is that each of their journey of each of these team members, Even performance management. What are you doing on performance management? What is the conversation you're having with your team member, telling how this team member did not do something well? I mean, is that suddenly in performance management, as a performance management, that appraisal, you suddenly figured out that person is not doing? Are you coming into the meeting to tell how something is not working? Or are you coming into that meeting to tell what has worked and what you and the other person is committed on working on personal development of this person? So if you ask what should managers start doing from tomorrow, take up all these things which you are pushed in the back burner because you're so busy executing something, chasing some moonshots. I'm not sure what it is, because your moonshot is your talent. There is no other moonshot you have. And that's the role of changing manager's role. All you thought is someone's job, whether it is finance job of understanding P&L, or did you thought it is the people practices is job of the HR person. Please understanding P&L is your job, because you're as a manager responsible for that delivery. And it comes from a P&L statement, understanding what you're doing, why you're doing, how you're doing, to actually entire piece around talent. In disproportionately investing in your talent is the new shift of the manager, and enormous learning. If you are a person who listens to audiobooks, please listen. If you're a person who watches movies and interpret from movies, there are so many movies which give phenomenal there are many ways you learn. Some people just go on some walking or rock climbing. There are a lot of people in Ether who are into some rock climbing and all that stuff. I admire, and with that my learning stops. I have no way going there. But they're amazing, because there is so much you learn there. There is so much and one is doing something which is not normal and disproportionately investing there, and also learning about the technology function changes in the world that's happening. We almost think that this is we outsource all this, isn't it? Are the managers doing all this stuff? This is what they are supposed to do now. What else should they be doing? Because that, and if they are not doing that, they will never be able to build a great teams. Okay. And it's like, you remember sometimes in interviews, we ask this question, and many years back, I asked, what are your hobbies? Then they say reading is my hobby. And then unfortunately, they're actually talking to an interviewer who reads a lot. So they're reading, what?
Poor guy.
Then some newspaper and some magazines, and you're just thinking, is that called reading? These are shocks that you come across. And no, you have to, if you want to be that person, that you are going to manage a set of people, whether it is 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, and work on their career progression and capability on competence of your department. Please remember, your job is just not delivering a task. Your job is beyond that, actually. Delivering a task is nothing. I think the young folks who come and say they do better than us, I'm sure my department has so many people who are smarter than me in all this, they raise it up. Okay. Your job is actually going beyond and saying, okay, how is that going to work,
No, I think it's very interesting. I mean, the last 2 answers you gave about managers, right, talks about leadership. I was, how you also, suddenly there was a goosebump sentence you said, how you, celebrate that I hired this person who performed so well, right? So I think, it's amazing, because, I was reminded of this story by Dr. Abdul Kalam talks about in 1979, where, the project was to, the computer in the end will say, no go. But Abdul Kalam was the mission director. He'd give a go. So instead of putting the satellite in the orbit, they put it in the Bay of Bengal, right? So the mission failed. And now the chief of ISRO would go to the press meet and say, this mission is failed. And then, we'll take another year to, to make this a success. And the next year when it's success, next year when it succeeds, the chief, Satish Dhawan, I think I remember, Satish Dhawan would ask Dr. Abdul Kalam to go for the press meet, right? Which shows a true leader. These are all some of the skills that the leaders should instead of focusing on. That's what aligning with what you were saying. Instead of being that execution king or executing tasks or those things are a lot of smart people these days. They are well equipped to execute those things. But a leadership comes with this kind of. I was able to enjoy. Thank you. So
something from my experience that I've learned is I've been fortunate to have worked with managers who have focused on my career and not my job. That made a difference, and that's also what Sunita said, that be the manager who focuses on building careers rather than just a job, the transaction out there. I think that's a powerful one. There's another interesting thing, Sunita, you spoke about. You said that there are people are right now disproportionately focusing on few things that is hatke, that's not in the mainstream. They want to do it. Now, the fifth question that I have is, does it mean that things like engagement are going to get personalized more and more as we go ahead? Is that the direction that you believe we are headed? If that happens, what role do you think managers would have to play in a transition like that?
See, it will naturally become very, very tailored to the department, tailored to your thing. But most importantly, organizations also have to play a role there. And it's not only managers, the first drop starts there. The way you design your systems, processes, policies. It's not one fit all. You have to see. For example, we have R&D center, and then we have the proto labs, we have the factory, we have the experience centers. Now, we really, initially when we came in, we hustled and we put together policies and we said all these policies, okay, roll it out, and at least we don't have big headaches and apart. Then we looked at our policies, we thought it is really funny because really all of them do not have the same thing, and there is this Dussehra was being celebrated big time in the factory, and in R&D lab hardly anyone noticed, except if there is some food we notice. Otherwise people are okay with it not being celebrated. But in factory it is celebrated in a big way. The question is, and of course we do have some members on that day. If something interesting is happening, they can travel to the factory. But having said that, this is a very simplified version I'm saying of how you have to curate. We went back and now started curating our policies, saying our policies will not be the same for all. And how do you curate it? Again, the same way your capability building initiatives also have to be curated to the departments that are there and their departmental needs. Then the manager then will start falling on saying, what is my departmental needs and what type of team members I have? How do I work on engagement with this team? Very different. It is going to be difficult in that sense. I don't say it's difficult. It is going to be different, because it is not easy job. One fit all. I sit and work, and then next 1 year I don't have to think about anything. And it is not that corporate can roll it out and I pick it up from there and then model it. Because corporate rolling out will not help also. Okay? And the most important thing for us is, there are two things which I am also observing in the young generation which are coming in. One is that they are the ones who really do not like authority figures generally telling them what to do. Okay, they will rebel. But at the same time, this is the generation that wants a lot of feedback. Okay, so now how do you balance both of that? The leadership which is working with them have to now use different sentences to curate the feedback. It is not saying it is working, not working, you're doing well, not well, I don't like it, I like it. Those are not the sentences they are willing to listen, because they will rebel big time on that. Now the question is, how are you going to, it is not that we are doing them some window dressing to the feedback. Your own mental model of that feedback has to change, of saying, how do I give feedback to the, and also most importantly, take feedback from them saying, is it working for them or not? Okay.
Interesting.
These things are going to be very difficult for managers as they go. And it is a dance. The organization has to do it. It's a difficult dance, and the organization cannot push it off on managers and then sit back and say, hey, why are you not changing? The organization has to start putting work in all the places, whether it's policies, systems, there. For us, the way execution, we said horizontals and verticals, a lot of commitment from leadership, and also realizing it creates a lot of anxiety, then over communicating it. In our organization, we have podcast, we have mails that goes from the founders, from the senior members. There are ask me anything sort of sessions that are there. There are all hands that happen. So we over communicate, but still we realize there is gap in communication. So there has to be a commitment from the organization, from its leadership team on all these things. And it cannot be brushed on managers that on one fine morning, they have to change the way they behave. I'm very worried about people dumping it on managers, because it's an organization commitment that actually goes into different layers of leadership. Okay, and we all work with it.
Thank you. Thank you. What I gather from Sunita is that, yes, it is moving toward personalization, but before this is not something that only the managers should be responsible or accountable for. It starts at the top, starts as an organization commitment. Managers are an important vehicle, but even if you decide to move that, you need to take care and enable them and prepare them for something like that. But it just can't be their responsibility only. That's interesting, Sunita. I know we had managed an hour of your time. There are a few towards the end, some rapid fire questions that I have for you. So if you allow me, let me shoot it to you.
Yeah, if it's tough, I know who will answer that. Senthil will answer.
No, he's the one who designed it, so I'm sure it is. It is not going to be that tough. So the first question for you is that if not HR as a profession, what would you have chosen or become?
I'm a storyteller, so I would have either written stories or be going around the villages telling stories from Harikatha.
Inspirational. Cooking, cleaning, or mopping during the lockdown and COVID time, which was easier?
Cooking. Yeah. I like to eat, so cooking is always, because at the end of cooking, you have nice food to eat. The other two are thankless, okay?
Yeah, interesting. Any of your next personal goal that you want the audience to be aware of, something that you're chasing
I'm writing another book, short stories, or a little bit longer short stories, and the other one is I'm trying to put together a book called HR, the Cusp People and Their Stories, trying to put together some topics and some stories of HR. It's just work in progress. I'm just a little bit too much occupied with work now, but I hope I finish all those things.
Absolutely, you would. Thank you so much. One book that had the maximum impact on you and you would like the audience to definitely grab a copy of that.
See, I think I read a lot, and most books I like, unless they're very frivolous, most of them I like. But the book I struggled with and tried to work with and actually grown out of it after a long time is In Search of Miraculous by Ouspensky. So it took many years for me to work with it. And whenever I felt lost, I think I went back to T.S. Eliot's poems, It was like a balm on the bruised but and I think I fell in love In Search of Miraculous because I always looked for something magical, and I thought as a child and later on as I grew up, there must be something magical in the world. We are not born into this world for something so basic, something magical. And I think the title stood, and then it hurt my ego because I really had to work on that book a lot more to understand.
Wow. Powerful. I've added one book to my list. Thank you so much. One thing that you thank the lockdown for and the changes for?
The pause it gave. And the pause taught us a lot,
Yeah.
To cry, to be generous, to feel helpless, and acknowledge we don't know all the answers, because our arrogance that we know as a human race everything, the pause taught us that we don't, and our helplessness. So we become more aware, more human, and more mindful.
Wow. I wish we had at least 2 more hours with Sunita today, but
Absolutely.
That's mostly from my side. Sunita, thank you again. Senthil, thank you for having me here. And over to you, Senthil.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I now I feel like we could have booked another at least 30 more minutes. I also can see from the video that Sunita chopped some of her points to accommodate time, because a lot of these points I think we're going to enjoy, and all of us here are going to think about. So thanks a lot for, and especially from the first how it started, how you talked about listening, and how we talked about many scenarios you covered, right? So I think was great. It was really, really going to be very useful. And so thanks a lot. And we should again do a session soon. So we'll come back to you, Sunita. So all the best. I think with all the things that you said, it was almost, the overall theme was for me was so tempting to see how work is at Aether, right? That's how it felt, because all the points you accidentally had that impact on me. So it was amazing. So let's meet again soon. And thanks a lot for all our times.
Thank you very much, Senthil and Ketan. And thank you for interest in Aether and inviting me here, and appreciate. And we are learning at Aether. We make a lot of mistakes. But we at least trust ourselves, and then we get up and we continue the journey.
No, that's what I felt. When you were saying, when you started off by saying, Ketan, you said I'm charismatic and I'm not all that. And that's exactly what, like 2 days ago we were discussing, that charismatic people don't always say that they're not, right? So I think that's how you're also ending by saying Aether, and still we are learning. But I think it's phenomenal. All these points you brought up, I think there's so much to learn. And of course, and that's the right approach, that we have to be constantly learning, right? So amazing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes. Bye.